So, my talk concerns the very famous paradox in Descartes, and it will be not much about logic, but rather about actions. And it's actually a pity that Henry Bracken is not with us now, because I am using partly his methodology here. So, this is the story. I hope you can read it now. What is important is the second and the third paragraph, where actually the paradox is forward. So, should I read it, or can you read it?
Oh, yes.
Oh, now,
yes.
yes. Perfect, yeah. That's much better. Thank you. So there is a dilemma before Protagoras and before Euatlus.
It's clear.
It's clear, yes, everybody's there. Okay, so I go further. So here is the quotation from Euatlus, one of the three authors who tells us of this paradox. And here is the talk outline. I will go back to discussing paradox in paragraph 2. But before that, I would like to outline the problem and to suggest why we need another way to solve it, and how it is connected with rationality and rationality in action precisely. So here is the scheme that suggests that both participants of that story would like to resolve the tuition fee dispute. However, Euatlus needs to do nothing to reach that goal by means of his intention to escape from payment. Contrary to that, it is Protagoras who has to do something, and in fact a lot, to get paid, because he needs a lawsuit, and he needs a certain verdict out of that lawsuit to get paid and to resolve the tuition fee dispute in his way. So that's the problem. Euatlus needs to do nothing, and he escapes from paying. Whereas Protagoras has to work hard to get paid in many aspects. So, before Protagoras went to the court, there wasn't really a problem, because once Euatlus wins a lawsuit, he is to pay with the contract, because he has won the lawsuit, and there is a lawsuit he has won. However, he is not to pay by the contract. Once there is no lawsuit, Euatlus has won. So here, before Protagoras goes to the court, nothing happens. There is a debt, and it stays as it was from the very beginning. However, this is exactly the historical decision of which Euatlus reports in Arctic Nights. The jurors left the matter undecided because the jury didn't know how to decide it. So they left exactly as it was in no problem case. There is a debt, and so it stays unresolved. But the problem appears when actually Protagoras starts to act. Protagoras went to the court, and there is a lawsuit, and now we have something that seems to be a dilemma. So, since there is a verdict, Euatlus is not to pay by the verdict, because he wins his lawsuit. And he is to pay now by the contract, because there is a lawsuit, Euatlus has won. However, if there is a verdict that Euatlus is not to pay by the verdict, I go now to the left part of this slide, then Euatlus does not win the lawsuit, and so he is not to pay by the contract, since he wins now lawsuit. So the problem appears only when Protagoras wins when Protagoras went to the court, and there is a lawsuit and there is a verdict. So the historical decision provides no problem, no paradox. Paradox appears when Protagoras actually starts to act. There are numerous solutions suggested to that paradox, and the general idea is to make additional distinctions. This was the goal of our paper written together with Ivan a couple of years ago, where we argued that it is a sophism, it is some complicated task, and when we try to make additional distinctions, the decision is not that elegant as we would like it to be. So we have two groups of decisions. Law-based decisions, for instance, two suits, probably the most popular decision when the first lawsuit delivers the verdict that it is unduly addressed of Protagoras, and then Protagoras goes once again to the court, and the second verdict says that the Euatlus should pay because there is a verdict, there is a lawsuit, he has won the first one. So it rests on the idea of unduly decision. So we can also think of other unduly decisions like investigation-oriented. Investigate in what sense we take the first court or the first lawsuit or the first lawsuit won, as Notov suggests in the first part of the 20th century, relying on Russell's idea of type of different types. So we can think of burden of proof decision, which is procedural, means that if two participants in the court, they have both two arguments each, but the burden of proof lies on Protagoras, since he was the one to start with the lawsuit, then Euatlus win. Euatlus is to win because the burden of proof is on Protagoras. And there is a decision what sometimes is called American, which is completely unauthentical to the ancient Greece practices, when Euatlus hires a lawyer. And so there will be a lawsuit won by the lawyer, not by Euatlus. That's the point. We can also recall logical formal decision, one suggested by Oquist on the basis of geometric logic and the special formalism, which rests on the idea of making distinction between necessary and sufficient condition. The idea is that in the contract between Protagoras and Euatlus, there was a necessary condition that Euatlus starts law practices. And so Euatlus can win the lawsuit only if he fulfills that necessary condition, which, as we have seen from the story, he didn't. We can introduce temporal distinctions. That is the idea by Wolfgang Lenzen, also in the 70s suggested. And we can also recall paradox of self-reference. I would rather put them under the title no decisions, because these approaches suggest that we cannot solve the paradox because it's self-reference, and so either no condition can be applied to itself, either each of the arguments suggested by the two participants cancels itself because of the contradiction. So my idea is to try to suggest a solution which would be legally valid because it's heuristically accountable, and formally valid because it's formally defensible in sense of argumentation. What I suggest is to look for a solution that will be based on somewhat another framework, a framework of actions and argumentation about actions. What I suggest is to look not to the question what the jury should do to solve the problem, as the paradox says, but instead what Euatlus has to do, when the verdict already exists, and also to find the answer how to defend this intention on the basis of practical argumentation. Why practical argumentation here? Theoretical argumentation used before is the argumentation of, we can say it's descriptive about facts, and that's the idea how the paradox appears. Because the facts, Euatlus wins lawsuit, Euatlus wins lawsuit, Euatlus pays the fee, is contrary to Euatlus doesn't win, or Euatlus does not pay. So it's a contradiction. And the theoretical argumentation transfers the propositional value from the premises to the conclusions by means of arguments, whereas practical argumentation is about actions. It's non-descriptive in that sense. It has to do with persuasion, and instead it transfers the legal propositional value from the consequences of the action to the conclusions by means of arguments. Why from the consequences of the actions? Because there are only three ways how we can argue about actions: from good consequences, from bad consequences, and from defeasible modus ponens. It's defeasible because it's about actions. Since we evaluate action in some another framework, it makes it immediately defeasible, not like classical modus ponens. That's because I suggest that we should look for the decision with practical argumentation. So here is the scheme of the dispute. Don't worry, you need me to go all through. I just suggest that you look on the angles. No pay by the contract and no pay by the verdict. This is exactly what Euatlus would like to have. And paying either by the verdict or by the contract is what Protagoras wants to see. These boxes colored with pink suggest that when arguing, Protagoras and Euatlus, they take different propositions as true in different lines of their arguments. On that basis, in the central part. Whereas the parts that Euatlus doesn't win or Euatlus wins this lawsuit remain like facts, and they take them equally and they put them somewhere in red frames just because I take them as rebuttals. So, what's the point here is that we have four propositions and in pairs they used in different lines of argumentation by both speakers, so they change their opinion. Once they say that contract include the lawsuits with Euatlus as a party of conflict, but in the other argument, say Protagoras takes that the contract includes such lawsuits, and the contrary with Euatlus too. So that's a very important thing. They don't take them just as true, but they change their minds when arguing for the different goals. However, contrary to that, the idea that Euatlus doesn't win the lawsuit or Euatlus wins the lawsuit gives both give rise to two seemingly incompatible consequences. So, if Euatlus wins, then he can afford to pay by his verdict, and if Euatlus wins, Euatlus has to pay by the contract since he wins. And the same goes for the line taken by Protagoras. So Euatlus doesn't win, so he has to pay by the verdict, and so Euatlus thwarts to pay by the contract. So these two slides show that from those pink boxes, we take different lines of argumentation that change in different on different intentions of the arguers. However, from the white boxes, we take that each box can give rise to the consequences that is welcomed by either of the arguers. So we have three questions here. And in all these three questions, in one line of argumentation, Protagoras replies yes, in the other no, and the same goes with Euatlus. So they don't take the replies as true propositions, but they take rather them as comfortable and appropriate to the line of argumentation they are going to follow. So here the same scheme reorganized so as to show that we have different consequences that can be argued in favor of by the same lines of argumentation. So Euatlus is down the slide, no pay by contract or by verdict, and Protagoras is in the upper part of the slide. So what now I will go through is that since the Protagoras and the Euatlus are taking two different lines and changing the lines of argumentation, we can ask whether we have two agents, or perhaps we have one agent who suggests two lines and the other line of argumentation is complementary to that. And so there is a strong support in Searle, in his Rationality in Action, that diverse agents may do different parts of the same action. So there is no need of the totality of consequences we take in theoretical argumentation when, if we argue for the conclusion, we have to accept all the consequences that follow from that conclusion. Another idea is suggested by Bratman in the sense that practical reasoning is the reasoning which, in what the agent's desires, values and cares and their beliefs support the actions that have to be taken according to their values, desires and beliefs. And on that basis we can see that agents with different beliefs are diverse in the sense that if you take also the idea of soul, that if the belief supporting the actions is different, and if they can will different consequences of the same action, so we can suppose that the agents are diverse. However, there is the quote from the famous paper of Aumann, agreeing to disagree. If two people have the same priors, and we have seen from the scheme that the priors are exactly the same, and their posteriors for the given event A are common knowledge, and it is common knowledge because we have only four outcomes of the dispute, then they cannot agree to disagree, and that's the point. That's the point that gives us a clue that probably we don't have two agents here, but only one, suggesting different ways of outlining his own line of behavior. And here is the table suggesting that we have four lines of argumentation. Row 1 and row 2 for Protagoras, and y3 and y4 for Euatlus. And they are colored in the same color like the questions. And you can see that we have four lines, but each of the two lines taken by each of the arguers ends up in the same conclusion. So now I put the red column of that together, and we will see that here. We have only two lines, one for Protagoras and one for Euatlus. And they differ only in that sometimes they say yes and sometimes they say no, but it's just the same. Paying by the contract in action is just no pay by the verdict by means of actions, and paying by the verdict is not paying by the contract. So yes and no here comes in the same lines of argumentation. So in that point, probably I have to go for one moment back. Why I put them together in the last column? It's just because we can put together the lines of argumentation when it's practical argumentation, in the sense that you're taking the line and not subscribing for the truthness of proposition. So that's the point. So, and if we, oops. Went wrong. Sorry. So if we now take all this, the bulk of arguments, we see that Protagoras gets paid in either case, since both consequences of Euatlus' actions are saying so, either by the contract, either by the verdict. And since Euatlus has no other line than suggested by Protagoras, he is a sort of a variable in the dispute where Protagoras comes to the lawsuit and suggests another criteria for being paid. And so that's the idea that Euatlus is virtual in the Protagoras paradox in the court. Thank you. I'll stop here.